Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the financial planning podcast for parents who are senior level professionals with kids in school or college. If you're tired of stitching together 4 different specialists to run your financial life, you're in the right place. I'm Paul Fenner, certified financial planner, enrolled agent, and founder of Tama Capital. I also have 4 kids, including a set of triplets, so I know the pace. Let's get into today's conversation. What is it about May that makes time feel both 5 months long and 2 days short? Dr. Jennifer Dragonette is back with me to unpack the season that we're now calling Maycember, a play on May and a play on December. And we'll get into where that comes from and why. But think about the graduations, the finals, the last concerts, the last games, the recitals, stacked on field trips, stacked on state testing. The season that asks senior level parents in dual careers to be in 3 places at once and remember to not forget the snacks. We get into this concept called time travel and why most of us are constantly 5 minutes ahead or 3 days behind, but we're rarely where our feet are at today. And I share a confession about the part I hate most about when I'm at my own kids' events, even though I know that these are going to be moments I'm going to want back someday soon. Dr. Jen and I also talk about a reframe that I currently use with the families I work with here at Tama that has changed how I think about my own time. And it goes something like this. Would you actually trade places with the version of yourself from 5 years ago, knowing what you know today? And almost no one says yes. So what does that say about where we're at right now? Please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Jennifer Dragonette. All right, Dr. Jen, welcome back. It's been a few minutes since we've last seen each other.
It really has. I know we were just saying that, like it's maybe been a couple months and life has gotten busy. And I know that's one of the main things we're going to talk about today is just this busyness that we live in.
Yeah, I know. I've certainly missed you. Hopefully the audience has missed you as well because they've just been in I was going to say indicted, but I don't think that's the word, but they've just heard me talking month after month after month on different mental health and financial planning topics that kind of all run the gamut together of why we call this thing the emotional balance sheet. So it's going to be a fun conversation, I think, today.
Right. They've been inundated by you. Inundated?
Inundated. Yeah, not indicted. Inundated. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for.
I mean, maybe indicted, but...
So we're recording this on May 27th. I'm not exactly sure when it'll air. So it'll air long after what we now call Maycember is officially over. And for those of you that have not heard that term, I think we've talked about it maybe once before, but it's this idea that the month of December with the holidays and all the craziness that surrounds that is one of the busiest times of the year. And for parents, May seems to be another month that's the busiest time of the year because of spring activities, graduations, you name it. I know that I'm getting older now because I have at least, I think on average, 3 to 4 Tama kids graduating from either high school or college now, every year. And it's been that way for the last 3 or 4 years. And so I know that your 2 boys, one's going to be going into high school next year as freshman. Your other boy is going to be going into middle school as a 7th grader. Triplets, I don't know how they made it through their first year of high school. And Mackenzie will be a freshman next year with them as well. So from my standpoint, maybe it gets a little easier having them all at the same high school. But yeah, this Maycember thing is a real deal, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And maybe it's because I'm not sure if Teresa's going to listen to this episode or not, but I seem to hear her constantly in my ear saying it's every day I work so hard, life goes by so fast, but I feel like I'm either missing it or I don't get anything done. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of parents can relate to that as well, just getting swept up in the the day-to-day of life, I guess, if for lack of a better term. And so that's what I kind of want to unpack with you today, and how you talk through that with the families that you work with, and try to figure out time is time. And it's kind of an oxymoron when we want to say, like, how do we slow it down? And I don't know if there is such a thing, but on one hand, I feel like the harder we try to slow it down, the faster it gets.
Yeah.
So unpack that, Dr. Jen.
You got it. It's something I'm talking about with most of the parents I work with, and also my friends and my own family as a parent. And it is, it's interesting. I never had heard that term Maycember until last year when you and I talked about it. And it really, I think it's very apt, because I do have to give, I think the first time that I heard it, and I got to give her credit, is Marissa Lonick, who's a Tama family member, but also hosts her own podcast, Mama Work It. So if you're listening, Marissa, I'm giving that to you. Great term. And it's a sticky term. It makes sense because it really does fit what this feels like. And, you're right about time. It is a constant, and yet there is a way that the month of May feels both 5 months long and 2 days long. We're trying to cram everything into one wonderful, exciting, big, stressful month of time. And just as you say, on my end, we're balancing 2 different schools, promotion, graduation ceremonies, and final sports events, and final concerts, and final parties, and field trips, right? And oh, by the way, all the final exams and all the state testing, and it really does get pretty overwhelming. And then you layer in one of the things that I know you and I have talked about, which is these expectations for what our time together is going to feel like, our family time. And I know I'm preparing for all the summer travel that's going to be coming up, and then trying to see all of my own clients before the summer travel, right? And my whole point in all of this is that most of the things that are happening in these weeks, in these next month or two, are very exciting. It's really fun. Typically it's a closing up of a whole year's worth of work or performances. And yet, just as you say, there's also this sense of getting through it somehow, or needing to make it to the other side, or, kind of white-knuckle it so that we can get, to the live.
That's the part I hate the most, is that feeling where like, I'm just going to get through it. And I try to catch myself I'm aware of what I'm thinking, but it's like, we say this probably almost every episode. We're going to look back and want this time back.
Right. We are. And, it's so... It's like one of the concepts that I know we've talked about, that what are we waiting for, right? That there is the sense that life is out there at some point in the future. And of course it is. And we want to befriend our future self, and, be doing all the things that we need to do to plan for that future. And yet it doesn't really exist, right? It is a fantasy, and the way that we expect our future to look is probably not how it's going to look. And in a very little way, we don't know how much time we have. We don't know what our summer is going to be like. We don't know what June is like. We do know what today is like. And so I'm always trying to strike this balance, and encourage my clients to strike this balance of planning and anticipating enough so that we know there's a parent at every event, right? Or that, we can plan our travel around the very, very important things. And then when we've planned, and we know that we've planned enough, and that concept of enough I know is a big one, then it's really about being there, being where your feet are, being with your children, being at these events, even if it's the 15th musical performance this month, right? That this is important to them, and it's also important to us. And, I think often as parents, we're so good at, just showing up for the things, showing up for our children, showing up for our families. And yet we get to enjoy this too, right? This is the fruits of everyone's labor. This is something that we all think is really important, whatever these events are. And, I often find this really heartbreaking phenomenon where, here we all are at, let's just say, the graduation, and we're not really there. We're thinking about the next graduation, or we're thinking about how are we going to squeeze in that meeting that we, punted to be here. And so that just gentle reminder that if we notice that we're, rehearsing, right? We're preparing for something in the future. Or sometimes we're rehashing, right? Oh gosh, I wish I had been at that thing last week, or I wasn't fully present at that thing. Whenever we notice that's happening, that is actually those moments of mindfulness. Like, oh, come back, right? Come back here in this moment. And sometimes very literally, I'll just force myself to notice, okay, what is the temperature in my skin as I watch this track meet? Or what are the sounds I can hear right now as I'm at this musical performance, just to reground into that exact moment.
So it's kind of like you go back to your like five senses.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good hack for any time we're trying to be more present or grounded. And sometimes we'll actually, refer to this as a grounding skill, which is a little different than a mindfulness skill. Mindfulness is just paying attention on purpose to whatever's happening in that moment. Grounding is a very deliberate, purposeful bringing ourselves back into this present moment. It could be because we're spinning out or having an anxiety process taking over. It could just simply be what I'm talking about, where we notice we're not fully present. And so grounding is really sensory. It's any of our five senses, or six if we add in movement. What is happening in this moment? Can I feel my fingernails on my palm if I squeeze my hands? Can I smell the smell of someone grilling hot dogs in the background of this baseball game, right? To just be in that moment just a tiny bit more, because we're often just not there, right? We're 5 minutes in the future, or 3 days in the future, or 10 years in the future. And what a waste, right? Because that hasn't happened yet. And we're here in this precious moment right now.
So the one thing that was interesting about what you said is awareness, I think, is another word that always comes up in our conversations. Is being aware is one thing, but then actually doing something about it. And like how long can you stay in those moments? Because I think one of the things that I go back and forth on how well I do with this is, looking at my phone, like when I'm at an event. Like most of the swim families that know me know that, I bring my mobile office with me to the pool for every meet, every weekend. And there's only been maybe 2 or 3 times where I've not brought anything besides my phone or maybe my iPad. And on one hand, it's like, it's kind of sad that people know that, and, I get razzed about it in good taste for the most part. But there's times where I wish like I didn't take that with me. Like I just either sat and enjoyed the meet or sat and enjoyed the company of the other parents that I'm with. But it's really hard. These damn devices are pretty addictive. And that's, one of the concerns that I have, maybe because I'm getting older now that I'm 50, I have for my kids is that they're always on, and trying to like pull them away to do something outdoors or physical in nature, like movement, mm-hmm. like what you said, I think is a big challenge, unless like you're at a sporting event and they're playing and not on a device.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, it's an additional layer to what we already tend to do as humans, which is be anywhere but where we are. And now we have this very easy, facile way to just dive right into a, 3x5 inch screen that, is now our whole existence in those moments. And like everything, I really think of this in terms of middle path, where there's a lot of good that comes from the connectivity that we have, the devices that we have. You can probably be at more meets because you can bring your office with you, right? Yeah. And I imagine if you had to fully unplug in order to be there every time, you just wouldn't be able to attend as many of them.
It's funny that you say that, because I was just thinking about this the other day, because like I'm old enough now to where I remember when I started my corporate career, we didn't even have laptops. So like if you were working, like you were working in the office until you got whatever you needed done, or you just said, I'm done. But then when you left, you were able to, unattach yourself. Mm-hmm. And now that's just not the case, which I think kind of goes back to this feeling of always being on or always working, because that device, whether it's your phone, your laptop, or whatever, is so easy to carry with you. But I know for my own situation with having a big family of 4, and I get this question from Tama families often, like, well, how the heck do you do this, Paul, with all the schedules that I know that you're trying to juggle? Because I may only have 2 kids and like I'm at my wit's end. And I'm honest, I break it down for them. Like usually I'm in my office between like 8:30 and like 3:30. And then after that, like I start running kids around. And then I'll usually get like a break for an hour or 2 at night, and I'll squeeze some more work in then, or like I'll do it after I get the last kid home and I'll work. So I may be only putting in 9-10 hours a day, but it's not in one big block. It's a block of 6, a block of 2, another block of 1 or 3, and it could be all over the board depending on the schedules. But then I think about it too, is like I remember when the kids were younger, having the firm, Tama, and doing what I do allowed me to every morning walk my kids to the bus. And that's something I'll never forget. That's something I will always kind of cherish. And I never thought I'd have that opportunity. And nor, honestly, did I think I wanted that. I would just rather preferred to be in an office working and having, either Teresa or somebody else, help with that. But fortunately, I did have that opportunity. But it's interesting you brought that up, because I was just thinking about how there was a time early in my career, or our careers, that we didn't have that. Like that wasn't an option.
Right. And and it is an interesting pros and cons. There, as you say, there really, really helpful things that have come out of that, and the pandemic, right? And the way that we can work more flexibly, which is great, and then also challenging, because then we can work more, and we have to be, our own better bosses in those ways to kind of hold ourselves accountable. And, one of the things, I do want to come back to that idea of like, how do you do it all? Because I think that's a great question. And, one that I talk about a lot. And, the other piece that I wanted to just kind of close up in there is this question of intentionality, which I know is also something that we sometimes talk about. I think for all of these things, I don't typically see it as good or bad. That we can have an electronic device with us is not all bad, it's not all good. What is our intention? Is my intention in picking up this device right now that I have 15 minutes before my kiddo's going to play, and I have a call that I can make really quickly, and I'm going to do that, get that work over with? Or is my intention that I just am bored and I have a habit of picking up my phone? And so I think sometimes just even pausing to ask that question, what's my intention right now? Or if I'm driving, that's one of those things that I too never thought I would enjoy, taxiing my kids around. And that is really special time with them. And that's often when we get to have
completely agree.
Really important conversations, and, they're kind of captive with me, right? Particularly if it's just one of them, which is such a luxury. And I never expected that I would want that. And so in those moments, if I notice that, they're checking out, they're on a screen, I'm staring out the window, I might say, okay, what's my intention right now? And it's okay to decide we all just need to check out and do our own thing and be on screens. Absolutely fine. And sometimes that's not what we want to be doing. And so I think it's just a good, quick little hack to get in the habit of, same for anything that feels kind of addictive. No problem if someone can have a glass of wine in a healthy way. What's your intention? Are you trying to celebrate? Are you enjoying the taste? Are you with a friend? Or is it this kind of mindless, habitual thing, or I'm trying to not feel a certain way, right? There's a different functionality that can be a part of our activities.
So you mentioned wanting to come back to the point of like, I forget how you just phrased it, but how do you actually do it? And I think that's the question that I wrestle with, and that I hear Teresa talk about, and others, parents that I talk to, mainly parents that face that same thing. Well, again, going back to, I can be aware the intentionality is spot on, but then how do I live in the moment? And I know it's a loaded question, but is it? And I think you mentioned something. Is it just how we're programmed as humans?
To be out of our present moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is in a way, and I think there's different flavors of being out of the moment. Often we're in the future, right? We're kind of time traveling into the future, and that may feel like kind of an anxiety process when that happens. We're trying to get in front of something, or we're trying to anticipate something, be able to plan around it. And again, to a certain point, that's absolutely fine, and we need to do that. And the opposite is a scary thing, right? We're not thinking about the future at all. But often, I think as humans, we do that maybe more than we need to, and we've gotten subtly reinforced over time for anticipatory anxiety, that future focus. Sometimes people are also more in the past, and, from a psychologist perspective, that shows up a lot with depression, or shows up a lot when people have a lot of trauma that they're still working through, is what has already happened. It doesn't have to be either or like that. All humans do all of these things. It's just that, those flavors, if anybody's listening and thinking, well, I tend to go much more into the future, you tend also maybe to go a little more in that anxiety direction. Or, if we tend to go more into the past, maybe there's a little bit more of that depression flavor when we're struggling. Many of us do both. We're double winners in that way. And, so coming into the moment.
So lucky.
I know, right? Isn't that amazing? We get to time travel all over the place and come right back here. I think even just as we're doing now, having some levity around it, nothing bad is happening when we do that. We're not bad or wrong. We don't need to be ashamed of that. It's a very normal thing. And it just isn't super effective. So there's this process where, I think of it as like just turning the mind, where just getting to be more familiar with what happens for each of us, noticing how frequently during the day we do that time travel. And when it happens, just turning our mind back in. I don't mean just as though it's easy, but just like it's not complicated. Oh, okay, there I go again. Come back to this moment. And I find that it's like kind of a muscle. The more we do that, the more easily that happens, the quicker we see that we've kind of gone out of body. And we can get to know our own patterning with that. Do I tend to check out when I'm overwhelmed, right? When I'm under a lot of stress? Is that when I tend to do that time travel? That's certainly true for me. Some people, it's when they're bored, or, when they've been depleted, right? They've worked super, super hard all day. They get to the end of the day. There's this downtime they've just been craving all day, and then they can't really access it because, the stress has been building up. So that dynamic is the other piece that I wanted to come back to when people say, well, how do you do it all? How do you have,
yes,
Paul, 4 kids in school and a thriving practice and a marriage, right? Jen, how do you manage, this full practice and teaching and podcasting and momming, right? And it's not magic. We all have had this experience where, I certainly, before I was a mom, thought I could not be any busier. And then you add in a child or 3 or 10 and you can do it. And then you get a different job and you can do it. And it's not that we become superhuman or, we have actually more capacity. Right. We adapt and we prioritize. And it's this subtle prioritization that's happening all day long, every moment of the day. We can become more conscious of it, because really with our cognition, the way that our brains work, we have this bidirectional, although there's 3, so this kind of constantly bidirectional system between our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. And what we typically do, or the operating principle that we go on, is I've got to try to change the way I feel about something so that I can get my life in order, or I've got to think about this differently, right? Okay, I've got all these kids and busy job, and, how do I think about my time and my priorities? But there's this behavioral piece. And I'm a very insight-based therapist, and yet behaviorism is a real thing. And what we do has a very strong impact on how we think and how we feel. And so if we're trying to work with overwhelm, if we're trying to, take more things off of our plate, sometimes we actually have to do the behaviors before we feel ready to, or before we feel comfortable with it. So we will find time for all of these activities if we find time for all of these activities. And what I usually find, if we get really granular with people, is we have more time than we think. I know we talked about that idea of, time as a resource. And if we're out of body, if we're checking out, if we're, slumping into the end of our day, that's also time. And we can think about it differently. Not that we have to have every single minute of our day structured, because that's also overwhelming. But how are we actually spending our time? And are there ways where, in those few seconds, few minutes throughout the day that we just habitually pick up a phone, is there something else we'd rather be doing? Would we rather be learning something? Would we rather be connecting with people? Would we rather be taking a nap? Would we rather be moving our bodies, right? Because, more and more research is showing that little bursts of exercise are great for us, just like long, beautiful hikes and runs. And so, there's ways that we can take care of ourselves. We just have to rise up in our own priority list. And as parents, I know that can feel like a takeaway. It's really not. We tend to be better parents when we're also taking care of ourselves, when we're having fun and playing and connecting with our friends, when we're doing work that feels meaningful. Then we can show up, and it's not this resentful, oh my gosh, I have to go to the 15th game of the week kind of a situation. It helps us be more in our bodies when we also get to enjoy our lives too.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you mentioned about time travel, and I know that we mentioned his name on the podcast before, is Hal Hershfield, who wrote the book Your Future Self. And I've tried that with families that I work with, but probably in a different context than you just kind of laid out, where I'm trying to take people back and not be as so focused on the present or the future, because a lot of families feel like they're failing or falling behind. And my question to them, and I use this a lot, and it kind of helps from an awareness and a gratitude standpoint, is look back 3, 5, 10 years ago. Would you trade positions with your old self knowing what you know today? And I've yet to have that conversation with a family, or even myself for that matter, or Teresa, that like, oh no, it was so much better 5 years ago or 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This sense of busyness is there, but whether you're talking about the growth of your kids, the growth of your career, your financial growth, or your relationship growth, it's kind of like the stock market. It's usually going up and to the right. Now there's hiccups and noise along the way, but that's something that I think that's helped families that I've worked with on the financial planning side is that perspective of think back to where you were, name your time frame, and where you're at today. Would you trade places with yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is usually always yes.
What a great thought experiment. I really like that, Paul. And I'm kind of going through my mental Rolodex of my clients, and I think that almost all of them would answer exactly the same way, that, it's a nice reframe that often, our, like we've talked about in previous episodes, our bar moves with us, right? That what we felt like was going to be our destination, and that would feel like enough if I could just get that job or have that much money in the bank or have that baby that I've been wanting to have, right? That's kind of what I mean. Like we're always kind of, once I get to this, once I attain this, I'll be done, happy, values driven, whatever we want to be. And then we readjust and we get to that and we say, oh, well, actually, I didn't know. Now there's, I could be better. I could be a better parent. I could have more clients. I could, right? And so we're always moving that bar. And it's a hard thought experiment to hold. And I like your idea of, well, let's do it in reverse, right? Let's turn and look in the rearview mirror a little bit. And then, I imagine that we could kind of work with that in terms of that future self then. If we can forecast out into 5 years in the future, it doesn't have to be so far.
Right.
What would that person really want you to be doing with your time right now?
And I don't think this is really a topic that we've really dived into over the years, but I think what we're really this part of specifically what we're talking about is expectations and how we manage them. Mm-hmm. And I think that when our expectations get out of whack, that's definitely an issue that or a hiccup that causes us to get emotionally out of tune, I guess. I'm probably not saying this the right way, but and it's not that, and I've struggled with this, and I know I've talked with families, both on the personal and the financial side, that struggle with expectations. And I think you want to have expectations, but finding that word, coming back to enough, and that right level is really the key. Because I think having too low of expectations is not great, and having too high of expectations is not great either. So what's that sweet spot? Where do you find that harmony? And because what's the equation? Like your expectations minus reality equals your happiness, something like that.
That sounds accurate. Yep. Well, and where I found myself going when you were talking about that, Paul, I mean, I think there's so much truth in that, and so much potential for suffering in that too. And if we are fortunate enough to have a partner, an adult partner or a co-parent, I think that's a great conversation to have together too, because so much of, I'll speak for myself, so much of my expectations that I place in myself are often because it's what I think other people want from me, or what I think, here's my least favorite, what I think I should do, what I think, a good parent should do, or a good psychologist should do. And
that is an episode I remember, the whole should have.
Right. Where we're trying not to should on ourselves, right? And we can it happens so automatically and so internally a lot of the time. And so there is great power in hearing ourselves say these kinds of things out loud. And if we have a thought partner, someone that we can bounce these off of, often when we say, okay, here are the expectations I have for myself, by the time we finish that sentence, we know that's not realistic. If we say out loud the way we think in Maycember, right, to come back to that term, the expectations might sound like I have to, be able to attend every single event perfectly on time. I have to stay the whole time. I have to help with setup and takedown. I have to bring snacks. I expect myself to also then show up on time for all of my clients, be the best therapist I've ever been, right? Be attending to my relationship. I don't know how we're going to do all those things. And so, putting it out there, maybe we can have some grace with ourselves. Maybe we can put it out there with our children. And what I will share with you is every time I have done that, there's at least one of those things that one of my kids says, oh, you don't actually have to be at that one, right? And I'll take it, right? Because we're working on not make sureing, and I'm going to take them at face value if they say, oh, that's not an important one. Well, I'm so glad to know that, because then I can put my attention on this other piece or this particular event that's going to be more important to you. And, I don't need to over-index on the things that everybody else says are not important to them if that's the only reason I was going to be doing those things. But I think even just in terms of our own internal expectations for ourselves, we are our own harshest critics. I would never expect anybody in my family to be able to do all the things I expect myself to do. And that's not because I'm a superwoman who can do all the things and they actually can't. It's because my expectations of myself are not as reasonable as mine of them. And so we don't have to do this alone. We don't have to suffer alone. If you have a therapist, that's a great person to talk to, but it also can be a partner or a friend, or, even just saying it out loud to yourself or your cat, where is that reasonable, right? Is it okay to expect that much of myself? And then maybe even more importantly, to punish myself when I don't show up in that way.
Well, that is probably a good note to wrap things up with. And I think most of our conversations go, I think for you, the audience listening, hopefully this gives you something to chew on. I'm sure if you're, working parent like Dr. Jen and I, you could certainly relate, but it's having that, I guess, awareness, or knowing that you're not alone. There's resources out there like Dr. Jen, therapist, myself, financial advisor, that are there to help both on the personal, financial, emotional side of life. So Dr. Jen, always great to see you. Sad it took us a few more months to get back on and together, but always glad to see you, and look forward to talking again soon.
Thanks, Paul. We had to get you on the other side of 50 so we could talk again. Happy birthday.
Yeah, May started off with a big bang with that derby party for sure. So, thanks, Jen.
Thanks.
Before I wrap up, I want to leave you with 3 things I'm taking away from this conversation that I hope resonate with you as well. First is the seasons we white-knuckle through are usually the seasons we will want back later on in life. The sentence, "I just need to get through this," cost more than it sounds. And the version of you 5 years from now is going to look back exactly at this season and have an ache for it. Second, presence is not philosophical. When you catch yourself rehearsing the next event while still inside the current one, name one thing in the room you can see, hear, or feel. And as Dr. Jen pointed out, that's the whole intervention. It takes 5 seconds, and no one has to know. And finally, intention matters more than information. So the next time you pick up your phone at your kid's game, ask yourself what intention actually is. Sometimes a break is the honest answer. Sometimes it's not. Either way, naming the intention is the work. And it's the work that I have to do as well. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time. Now for the fine print. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not personalized financial, tax, or legal advice. Before making any decisions about your specific situation, please work with a qualified professional. Tama Capital is a registered investment advisor.